The clock strikes midnight, and the night descends, enveloping the peaceful town of Rothenburg in Germany. In that eerily quiet moment, the fire police station suddenly received an emergency call. On the other end of the line, a man was screaming in panic, his voice fragmented and incomprehensible.
"Everyone, hurry! Someone is about to die here!"
In the stillness of the dark night, that desperate cry for help seemed to tear through the air, leaving the telephone operator stunned. A horrifying murder case is about to be revealed. The small town of Sittensen, with just 10,000 residents, has never witnessed such a brutal crime. Here, people are only accustomed to brawls and drunkenness, not to scenes of horrific bloodshed. At 1 a.m., the police and medical staff quickly arrived at the scene of the Lin Yue Chinese restaurant, where a heavy atmosphere enveloped the place. 7 innocent lives were taken away on that horrifying night. The 7 victims were all Asians who were brutally attacked on the land they considered their second home. The man who reported the crime was still in shock, and in a daze, he recounted his terrifying experience to the police. His wife had been working at this restaurant for over a year, and every evening she had to stay late because of the heavy workload. To ensure her safety, he always came to pick her up at this time. But tonight, something was off. The ground floor of the restaurant was eerily silent. Not a single sound echoed, an unsettling silence that made him shiver. The restaurant door seemed tightly locked, but when opened, darkness enveloped him. The air was thick with a strange, foul odor, the smell of decay, and then he turned on the light. The moment the light spread, everything before him seemed to explode. Tables and chairs toppled over, and lifeless bodies lay in the corners of the room, on the floor, on the walls, and even on the tables, all marked with red X. Controlling himself amidst the fear, the man covered his mouth and nose and then rushed into the restaurant. Before his eyes, his wife appeared amidst the scattered tables and chairs, but it was too late. She had stopped breathing long ago, lying cold in the midst of a mess. The utmost horror gradually emerged, and he almost crawled out of the restaurant, finding a way to call the police. The police quickly arrived at the scene, facing an unimaginably tragic sight. Near the entrance, a Vietnamese chef lay slumped over, having been struck from behind. The police believe he knelt down to plead with the assailant, but the bullets inadvertently took his life. Despite their best efforts, the medical staff could not save him. On the second morning, he died from excessive blood loss. Could there be a hint of mercy from the murderer? But clearly, everything indicated there was no way out. The police discovered 3 more bodies among the chaotic tables. All were shot in the head, their hands bound with electrical wires, their knees bent in a desperate posture. No sign of mercy from the perpetrator. The victims were a 39-year-old Malaysian waitress, a 38-year-old Vietnamese female chef, and a 56-year-old Chinese male chef. Not far from there, a Thai male server also met the same fate of being shot directly in the head. The police could only record this terrible tragedy and speculate that the explanations for this brutal crime remain shrouded in darkness. Restaurant owner Danny Wing Hong Fan, 32 years old, and his wife Annie, 28 years old, were found. But the most notable thing was that under the tablecloth, the police discovered a 2-year-old girl, little Tiana, the daughter of Hong Pan and Annie. The little girl lay silently, carefully wrapped, but showed no signs of severe injury. Tiana is only in a temporary coma, thanks to the timely care of the medical staff. She quickly recovered. However, when the police tried to take a statement from Tiana, they couldn't gather anything about the perpetrator due to her very young age. The little girl was not able to provide any evidence or identify the perpetrator. The police hypothesized that perhaps in the final moments, Annie tried to plead with the perpetrator to spare her child, and although the plea might not have been answered, somehow the child was protected. Did the perpetrator realize that a 2-year-old child could not be a threat and therefore let the girl survive? According to the statistics at the scene during the attack, the perpetrator fired a total of 16 shots, with 11 bullets coming from a single type of weapon, while the remaining 5 bullets came from another gun. However, the strange thing is that the residents nearby did not hear any gunshots that night. The police initially hypothesized that the perpetrator could be 2 people and that this incident was the act of a criminal group who likely used a silencer. This explains the suspicious silence on the night of the bloody tragedy. But how did these guns end up in their hands when Germany has strict regulations on weapon control? In fact, even the police are not all equipped with guns, and ordinary citizens find it very difficult to purchase legal weapons. Therefore, the police suspect that this incident may be related to a major criminal organization, possibly the Chinese gang operating underground in Germany. The police turned their attention to a notorious organization known as the Triads. At that time, a branch of the Triads from Hong Kong was believed to be stationed in Hamburg, not far from the town of Sittensen, where the incident occurred. The bustling city of Hamburg in the 1990s, in the shadows, an underground force was infiltrating every corner, spreading fear among the Chinese community. The Triads, with their brutality and insatiable greed, turned over 90% of Chinese-owned shops into lucrative prey. Protection money, an illegitimate source of income, has become an obsession for honest business people. They don't want to, but how can they resist the cruelty of the Triad using fingers and gun threats? Such barbaric actions have become commonplace in Hamburg. No shop owner dared to resist. They could only grit their teeth and endure, hoping that one day this nightmare would end. Lin Yue Restaurant, a bright spot in the Chinese community, also could not escape the attention of the Triads. Could this horrific massacre be a brutal act of revenge because the owner of the Hong Kong restaurant dared to refuse to pay protection money? The police initially suspected the same, but as the investigation progressed, new clues emerged that made them reconsider this hypothesis. The cash register of the Lin Yue Restaurant, where 5,015 euros in cash were stored, was completely robbed. 2 laptops and 7 mobile phones also disappeared without a trace, but compared to the huge protection money collected by the gang, these items are hardly worth anything. And if it's for money, they could completely resort to kidnapping for ransom, even robbing the entire wealth of the Hong Kong family. Brutally taking action, 7 people died just for a little pocket change? That is truly absurd and does not align with the working style of a major criminal organization like the Triads. The forensic team has determined that the time of the victim's departure was around midnight, which is 1 hour before the police arrived at the scene. The details indicate that the perpetrator did not fully control the situation, and their actions were unprofessional, completely different from what people usually imagine about the Triad. So the police have ruled out the Triad as suspects. So who is behind this horrific massacre, and what are their true motives? The police had hit a dead end. Every clue seemed to lead to an invisible wall. The case seemed to be at a dead end for 2 days after the incident, until 8:30 p.m. on February 7th, 2007, when a glimmer of hope appeared in the dark night. During a routine inspection, the traffic police discovered a suspicious blue Volkswagen, inside which were 2 Vietnamese men around 30 years old. At first, they only appeared slightly nervous, but when asked to get out of the car, one of them secretly threw a piece of paper under the vehicle. That sneaky action did not escape the attention of the traffic police. The paper was picked up, and inside was an architectural drawing of the Lin Yue Restaurant. The police immediately recognized the connection of these 2 men to the murder case. They were taken to the police station for further investigation. The car was also thoroughly searched, and in the trunk, the police found a roll of wire identical to the type used to bind the victims. 2 laptops belonging to Hong Kong and all the victims' mobile phones were also found, and finally, under the car seat, the police discovered 2 guns. After inspection, they were confirmed to be the murder weapons used in the Lin Yue Restaurant case. Initially, the 2 suspects adamantly denied the charges, but faced with irrefutable evidence, they eventually had to bow their heads and confess. Both of them are from Vietnam. The older brother is named Dao Trong Duong, 35 years old, and the younger brother is Dao Cao Pong, 31 years old, and they are biological siblings. They have many previous convictions for fighting, arguing, theft, robbery, and other crimes. This time, committing a serious crime was not the first time, but frighteningly, the first time had already caused such a heartbreaking consequence. When the police interrogation progressed, they confessed and revealed 3 more accomplices, all Vietnamese, were involved. Among them, one is named Phan Tu Phu, 30 years old. Another is surnamed Ngo, 40 years old. And the mastermind of this case is a man surnamed Quach, 42 years old. So, what conflict did this 42-year-old man named Quach have with Hong Kong and Annie, and why did he commit such a brutal act? It can be said that sometimes excessive kindness can bring disaster upon oneself. Mr. and Mrs. Hong Kong are very kind and gentle, always doing their best to help other Chinese and Asian people in Germany. All the staff in their restaurant are Asians whom they take great care of both in work and life, but this kindness has brought them disaster. He, Mr. Kwok, the one who received help from the Hong Pom couple, is actually the mastermind behind this horrific incident. Half a year before the first incident, he came to the restaurant to apply for a job. At that time, he had just arrived in Germany and was facing difficulties. Hong Pom, with a kind heart, did not hesitate to help, but he was completely ungrateful to Hong Pom. Always wandering around the restaurant when working, Hong Pom thought he was just curious and not too concerned, but then suddenly one day he left the restaurant without a word of goodbye. The Dao siblings said that Hong Pom and his wife kindly welcomed him into their home, but when they discovered that the restaurant was making a lot of money, his greed had awakened, and he took advantage of their kindness to thoroughly investigate the layout of the rooms and the opening hours. Then he secretly and continuously looked for opportunities to carry out his dark scheme. About a month before the incident occurred, the Dao brothers were drinking at a bar, and they had become acquainted with him. He and the Dao brothers, 3 compatriots in a foreign land, felt a sense of closeness due to their shared plight of poverty, and they quickly found common ground. The main target is the Lin Yue Restaurant, and the Dao brothers and Kwok collaborated from their very first meeting. As the mastermind, Kwok drew up the layout map of Lin Yue Restaurant and devised a meticulous plan to attack Lin Yue Restaurant. On the 4th of January 2007, that was the fateful day when the shadow of crime cast its darkness over Lin Yue Restaurant before the act. They, demons in human disguise, lured 2 other Vietnamese into the group, except for Kwok, who stayed behind. The remaining 4 were all involved in this brutal act. 11:30 p.m., in the dark night, the Dao brothers drove a blue car to the Lin Yue Restaurant. In the car, they wore black hats, hiding in the darkness, ready to wait for the opportunity to act. A few minutes later, the restaurant began to close, and the noisy restaurant that had been bustling all day finally fell silent. At this moment, there were only 2 people outside on duty. The Dao brothers and Pan Tu Fu, wearing black hats, infiltrated the restaurant. The black weapons were aimed at everyone, and the atmosphere in the restaurant seemed to freeze. Everyone was terrified and didn't dare to move. Under the signal from their older brother Dao, Fan Tu Fu went upstairs intending to look for cash at the home of the Hong Pom couple. At that moment, a Vietnamese waitress, being near the back door, quickly ran towards it to try to escape, but the Dao brothers were familiar with the layout of the restaurant. They used chains to lock the back door before she could escape. She quickly called her husband for help, but he didn't answer because he was taking a shower. In a dangerous situation, she called another relative, but fate was cruel. Just 19 seconds into the call, she was captured by the Dao brothers. At this moment, the 2 Dao brothers were only concerned with money and had no intention of taking anyone's life, after slapping the female employee in the face. They left her in the hallway to avoid causing a commotion. The 2 Dao brothers took out the wires, ready to tie everyone up. But when they got to the Vietnamese chef, he fought back fiercely and struggled with the younger brother. Everything became chaotic when a strong tug knocked off the chef's helmet, and his face now clearly showed utter fear. Perhaps you will feel the heavy atmosphere and the fatigue filling the space, a sensation as if each of his breaths were soaked in fear. Dao's younger brother, in a fit of rage, raised his weapon high but hesitated to pull the trigger. Immediately, the chef sensed the imminent danger, turned around, and ran towards the door, his heart pounding and anxious, each step feeling like a step closer to the door of death. Finally, he decided to act. A continuous and rapid gunshot rang out. 7 bullets were fired, 6 of them hitting the target, each bullet like a knife cutting off all hope. The chef fell to the floor face down, his breath growing weaker and weaker. Dao's younger brother, with ruthless cruelty, believed he was dead and stopped. His brothers, in a fit of mad rage, decided not to let anyone survive. The young Thai male servant tried to escape, but the bullet took his life. All the remaining people, the Malaysian waitress, the Vietnamese dishwasher, and the Chinese chef, knelt down and begged in despair, with no mercy to be found here. These cruel ones, with their eyes bloodshot in the frenzy of slaughter, quickly extinguished the lives of these people. The cold bullets shot straight into their heads without a moment's hesitation. Hong Pom and his wife realized there was no other escape in this moment. They desperately fought back, hoping to find a chance to survive, but against the armed robbers, all efforts were in vain. His brothers coldly pulled the trigger, the gunshots rang out, and the couple fell down helplessly. Faced with brutal violence and with her last strength, Annie tightly embraced her little daughter Tiana, wrapping her in a tablecloth, her eyes filled with prayer, hoping that the evil would let her daughter survive. That is the most sacred instinct of a mother. After completing their brutal act, the criminals stole all the valuables they could carry and quickly fled the scene. They have plunged the small town of Sittensen into an endless darkness, making many people here unable to forget the horror. The case at Lin Yue Restaurant was officially tried in May 2009, and the 3 perpetrators were sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. This is the harshest sentence that German law can impose in a country without the death penalty. The man with the surname Ngo, although not directly involved in the case, was sentenced to 14 years in prison, and Kwok, the mastermind behind the incident, received only 6 years in prison because he did not directly participate in the attack that resulted in 7 deaths. Will justice truly be served, even if it ends with a fitting sentence for the perpetrators? This case has left wounds that cannot be healed. The town of Sittensen, which already had a small population, lost more than 1,000 residents since that horrific event. Many people no longer want to live here, and the little girl Tiana, the youngest victim, was also taken by the police to her grandmother's house in Hong Kong. The heartbreaking scene unfolded upon her return to her hometown. The little girl cried every day and could not adapt to a life without her parents. The little girl, who once had a happy family, suddenly became an orphan overnight, destined to carry the painful memories of her parents' cries and worried looks. Perhaps it will forever remain in the young girl's tender mind. That is an immense loss for a child who understands nothing about this world.